Welcome to The Explainer. All right, today we're jumping into some really foundational ideas from a couple of key chapters of the Quran. We're going to look at the nature of God, this whole idea of a chain of revelation, and what it all means for a fundamental choice we all have to make in how we live our lives. So, we're kicking things off with this verse, one of the most famous in the entire scripture, really. And this single line, it pretty much sets the stage for everything else we're going to talk about. It boils down a core belief that the divine is absolute, singular, and completely self-sustaining. Okay, so how are we going to tackle all this? Here's the plan. We're going to start with the big one, the concept of God. And from there, you'll see how it all kind of dominoes down into everything else. Divine books, how to read them, human choice, and yeah, even how it all connects to something as down-to-earth as money. All right, let's get right into it. The most foundational question there is, right? Who is God, according to this text? Well, the verse of the throne, or Ayat al-Kursi, gives us this incredibly powerful, super detailed answer that people have been digging into for centuries. And wow, this description is just packed with layers. I mean, think about it. It kicks off with absolute existence, the idea of being ever-living, not needing anything at all to exist. Then it shifts to this idea of absolute vigilance. He doesn't get tired, doesn't need to sleep like we do. From there, it's about total ownership and infinite knowledge. And the text makes it clear. This knowledge is so vast, we can only understand the tiny bits he allows us to. And it wraps up with this concept of his incredible dominion, his kursi, which he upholds without any effort at all. It's a complete picture of absolute power and glory. Okay, so if that's the nature of God, the next logical question is, how does a being like that communicate with us, with humanity? And that brings us right to the idea of revelation. See, the scripture here doesn't just pop up out of nowhere. It actually places itself in a long, long line of divine communication. What the text does is it basically establishes this continuous thread of divine messages. So it's not presenting the Quran as something that cancels out everything that came before. Instead, it's positioned as the final link in this long historical chain, something that confirms the essential truths that were revealed to prophets like Moses and Jesus. And this is where the interpretation gets really specific. According to the commentary, the Quran confirms the original message, the direct revelations given to Moses and Jesus. It's making a distinction. It's not necessarily confirming the entirety of the texts we have today. The view here is that the current Old and New Testaments are more like historical accounts that have pieces or fragments of that original divine message, but they're also mixed in with human stories and accounts written down later by followers. And that idea, that distinction, leads us to a really key concept for understanding the scripture itself, and that is, not all guidance is laid out in the same way. The source tells us there are actually two different kinds of verses, and you kind of have to approach each one a little differently. So the first type is called mukam. That basically means firm or super clear. The commentary says these verses are the absolute foundation of the message. They're straightforward, no ambiguity. They spell out the core beliefs, the moral rules, the things a believer needs to do. This is the bedrock. Then you've got the other category, mutashabihat, or the ambiguous verses. Now, according to the commentary, these are the ones that talk about things that are just beyond what we can perceive. Stuff like the nature of the afterlife or what God is really like. The idea is they use metaphors and symbols because our human language just can't fully capture those realities. The source suggests that the right way to approach them is to accept them as they are, without trying to nail down a literal meaning that's just beyond us. So you've got this message, right? Part of it is crystal clear, and part of it is more metaphorical. And at this point, the focus really pivots to us. The scripture lays down a core principle. There is no compulsion in religion, and that means humanity is presented with a huge fundamental choice. So what happens if you choose to reject that divine guidance? Well, the text has a specific term for what you'd be following instead, the hut. And this is a really powerful idea. It's not just about not believing, it's about active rebellion or transgression. It's when any person or even a whole system steps way over its proper limits and starts acting like it's God, imposing its own will on everybody else. And the commentary actually breaks this down into a kind of progression, like a descent. It starts with what's called fisk. That's basically when you know the rule, but you break it anyway. From there, it can escalate to kufr, which is when you stop just breaking the rule and you start rejecting the rule itself, in principle. And the final step, that's tagut. That's when you don't just reject God's authority, you try to replace it with your own and make other people follow you. So when you boil it all down, this choice you make determines who or what is guiding you. And the scripture presents it as a really stark contrast, a binary choice. If you choose God as your guardian, you're led out of the darkness of ignorance and into the light of truth. But if you choose Tagut as your guide, you're led away from that light and deeper into all kinds of darkness. And you might think this is all just abstract philosophical stuff, right? This choice between guidance and transgression. But it's not. The scripture takes this idea and applies it to something incredibly practical: economics. It actually lays out two totally opposite financial systems that are supposed to be a direct reflection of these two paths. So to explain the idea of a society built on giving, the source uses this amazing metaphor from farming. It says an act of charity isn't a loss at all. It's like planting a single seed. It's an investment that God can make grow 700 times bigger. It's this incredible symbol of multiplication, of blessing, and true prosperity. And this is where the commentary really draws a line in the sand between two economic models. On one hand, you have a charity-based system. It's presented as being built on generosity and compassion, which leads to cooperation and growth for everyone. On the other hand, you have an interest-based system. The term is riba, and this is seen as being built on the complete opposite: selfishness. The argument is that this system naturally creates resentment, it eats away at the social fabric, and in the end it causes economic collapse because it just funnels wealth to the top and preys on people's needs. And the condemnation of this interest-based system is, well, it's absolute. There's no middle ground. After making all the moral and economic arguments, the scripture finishes with this incredibly stark, incredibly severe warning. The source essentially says that sticking with this practice isn't just a sin. It's like declaring war on the divine order itself. It's that serious. And that's really the final thought-provoking idea we're left with, isn't it? We've gone on this journey all the way from the nature of the entire cosmos down to the rules for a simple loan. And what we see is a worldview where those two things are completely, deeply connected. So it makes you ask a pretty challenging question, right? If our economic systems are just a mirror reflecting our deepest values, what do the systems we all live and work in today say about what we truly believe?